All right, something just came into my mind and I thought about with my collection of cassettes and stuff like that, tapes and stuff like that, just the concept of tape and for the audiophiles and people. Basically, what tape did for the world of music and audio production, and also what the videotape did for video production, back in the 1970s. Starting in the 60s, they developed home videotape recorders of different kinds, the Ampex VR 1500. Ampex was part of Ampex's first home video system. And the first one was the Telcan, the television in a can. Basically, they were black and white. Sony CV2000 1965 is the first VTR videotape recorder intended for home use that was fully transistorized. So, basically, it democratized video production and audio production. The tapes did, magnetic tape. So in 1983, Sony introduced the Beta Movie. It was a Betamax video cassette camcorder, so released in 1983. So the camcorder, videotape camcorders, as we know them, began in the early 80s, and it really democratized and, made it possible for low-budget, independent filmmakers to be able to produce their own movies and content, even porn or whatever they wanted to make, and distribute these videotapes among the masses. And it was no longer that the recording, big movie companies decided what people watched. The big television companies decided what people watched. All of a sudden, people could be democratized and in a democratic way and be free, so they can produce the content they want and distribute it among the masses. Kind of like a YouTube of the 70s and 80s and 90s, YouTube, before there was YouTube, was the ability to produce amateur, low-budget, home-produced stuff, videos and things. Now before the camcorder exactly was made, Sony made something called the CV2000. That was one of the very first home video tape recorders. It wasn't a video cassette format. It was a reel-to-reel, and it was the Sony CV2000 Consumer Video, and it was developed by Sony. It was introduced in 1965, and that was the first home-produced thing to where people could produce their own homemade low-budget movies and things like that. And they also had something called they also sold something called an optional video camera ensemble, known as the VCK 2000 add-on kit. Contained a separate video camera, microphone, and a tripod. But back then it was a thing to where it wasn't a camcorder. Even in the early 80s they had a VHS thing. There was like a small VCR with a camera attached to it with a cable and even a tripod, and basically you would have a big satchel, a big bag that you would carry, a great big camera bag that you would carry on your side that had this big VCR in it. And when I was a little kid, I remember they had one in school, and basically had a big VCR the size of a boombox that went in a big bag, a big camera bag on your shoulder, and there was a big cable that went from the bag over to this big camera that you held up on your shoulder to videotape. And that's how they had that stuff when I was a kid, small child, that's how they did it. So basically the portable video cameras available to the public was democratizing the video producing to where low budget people and porn and things that people didn't even low-budget movies, that would be self-produced, and they could put these on tape, and they could duplicate these tapes and distribute them themselves. and also with the music world. You know, before the cassette tape really made it possible for independent music makers, independent people, what they call today indie music, independent indie music. People can produce things themselves, you know, self-produce things themselves, and basically produce things themselves and distribute it themselves. No longer did we have to depend upon record companies to decide what we listen to. You know, the cassette tape made an album of Bruce Springsteen. You know, basically what it did, it put an album of David Bowie. I put a David Bowie album on the same platform as a homemade recording. It put them on a level playing field. A homemade recording, self-produced album, on the same level with a homemade recording with a professionally studio recording. So, you know, you can take an actual album, and you can actually produce your own real albums, you know, on a tape. And the entry, it lowered the bar. I guess videotape and cassette tape really lowered the bar. I guess VHS tape, I guess video cassette, whether it's Betamax or VHS, basically video cassettes lowered the bar and lowered the entry point for people to self-produce their own material on video cassette or audio cassette. You know, these low-budget people could produce their own videotapes. You know, if it's audio tape, you know, you could produce your own albums like the rappers, and when rap got started in the 70s, in the New York or whatever, they would self-produce their own rap, and they would duplicate these and distribute it, and it would be called lo-fi music. You know, so that's what lo-fi was. The beginnings of being able to democratize the music industry and give people the power and the freedom over the music that they can distribute and use.